Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
And C, because the planets are now aligning, and it's hard to know where to start. It is truly difficult to speak to a country that is so divided between people who knew this was going to happen and people who are still labouring under the illusion that it was in any way avoidable. And you know, my fetish for trying to find the oyster knives, the little levers that will bring us all back together and render us united once again. So, and I failed. I mean, I don't think I'm ever going to be able to, because cognitive dissonance and the Dunning-Kruger effect combine to create a significant swathe of the electorate that are almost impenetrable. And today's got a great example of that. So what Boris Johnson and Michael Gove are doing now, I don't know if you've seen this, they're claiming that when they agreed to the December agreement on the withdrawal agreement, the thing that contained the backdrop and the so-called divorce settlement, that they didn't really understand what they were signing up for. Particularly with relevance to the backstop, they're asking for legal advice, and so are some of the other key Brexiters in the cabinet, Penny Mordaunt and others. Just think about that for a moment, okay? So what they did, they signed up in December as cabinet ministers to something which they now claim they didn't actually fully appreciate the consequences of. This is actually quite important in terms of highlighting the hypocrisy and the fraudulence that is now running utterly unchecked through the bloodstream of our nation, thanks to people like Boris Johnson and Michael Gove. Just think about that for a minute. Back in December, they signed up to something that they didn't understand. I'll move on in a minute, but this, of course, puts into a very different light some of the people who've embarrassed themselves on this programme about the Irish backstop, people who've said things like nothing is agreed until everything is agreed, or we can do the checks away from the border, or we can do it in the Irish Sea. And it's the nature of this programme that people who ring in have to display a higher than average level of confidence, so that, because otherwise the arguments fall apart very quickly. So people come on the programme very confident, repeating what Boris Johnson has said. You see, that's the really sick bit about Brexit. You don't have to be dopey to get conned. Clever people get conned every day, and they get conned usually by very plausible, posh-seeming people. They are the best con men. Ask anyone. The people who seem to have a patrician air. So when I end up having to gently or occasionally robustly explain to someone why they're completely wrong about what the December agreement represented, why just parroting that phrase, nothing is agreed until everything is agreed, displays a profound misunderstanding of what the withdrawal agreement represented. When we talk about Ireland, when we talk about the British border in Ireland, with reference to the Good Friday Agreement, we are only reading documents that are publicly available. But one mystery has been solved for me in the last 24 hours. The mystery of why people ring in to repeat things that are so easily disprovable and often go away, still convinced that they're right and I'm wrong. Even when you've read the actual words to them or you've explained what the things actually mean, they turn on another programme or they flick on their television or open their newspaper, and there is Boris Johnson repeating the nonsense that he has been spouting since whenever. So this is a fascinating development. The claim that he's trying to punt that he was duped. You've seen this, of course. He was duped. Michael Gove making similar noises. Other cabinet members apparently siding with them. We didn't realise what it meant back in December. Just hold that thought. Okay, I'm just gonna sit back for... How long have I got before the emergency tape kicks in and Steve Allen starts sharing his mince pie recipes? 14 seconds. All right, I'm just gonna sit back. Just think about what this represents. Boris Johnson, Michael Gove and others now claiming they were duped and they didn't fully appreciate what they signed up to in December, okay? Think. 14, yeah? Right. All right, well, let's not test it, much as I like mince pies, and indeed Steve Allen. Because what happened to the will of the cabinet? What about the will of the people? You don't get to change your mind, remember? You signed up to something in December. You now say you didn't understand it, so you want to change your mind. You're not allowed to do that under the rules that you wrote regarding Brexit. This is hypocrisy on a scale that even by the standards of the last 2.5 years beggars belief. A man who has insisted since June 2016 that you can't possibly change your mind when the facts change. You can't possibly review your position when evidence emerges that renders your original position ridiculous. You have to somehow follow this will of the people, which is, of course, only ever been the will of some people. You have to stick to it slavishly. You knew exactly what you were voting for. He will now try to finesse the notion that he is allowed to renege on what he did in December because he didn't fully understand what it was that he was doing. Come on. I mean, this is the bit where the police kick the door in, isn't it? You're not allowed to change your mind about Brexit, but you are allowed to claim you didn't understand what you were signing up for as foreign flipping secretary in December of last year. You're now turning around. And the thing is, recent history would suggest, he thinks he'll get away with it. This is where it's all gone a bit Trumpish. Treat people as if they're completely flipping stupid, and they will rarely disappoint you. And you don't, of course, have to persuade 100% of people. You have to persuade a small number. But lots and lots of clever people get conned too. That's the thing that keeps me, if you like, going. Because presumably, the clever people will now be realising the scale of this con. It could only ever have ended here, because what Theresa May has been charged with is mitigating damage. Brexit was always going to be bad. Any argument against that now has become completely abstract. No one ever talks about tangible benefits, material improvements, measurable goods. They only ever talk about completely nebulous, notional principles like control, without actually telling you how anything is going to change. They gloss over the fact that the immigration situation in this country was absolutely the result of choices taken by successive governments rather than anything imposed upon us from outside. And even that phrase there, which someone like me falls into the trap of using, it doesn't get imposed upon you from outside if you're part of the organisation that is imposing. It's not outside. We are in it. So Theresa May was charged, and she knew this, and this is one of those moments where I bow to nobody in my disgust at Windrush and sundry other elements of her so-called hostile environment, but in the context purely and simply of managing the Conservative Party and accommodating Brexit, I do sometimes feel sorry for her, and I do sometimes think that she might actually be more deserving of credit than we realise, because she seems to me now to be almost at the end of the road, because she has presumed that as more and more evidence emerged, more and more pennies would drop. She doesn't want a second referendum, ostensibly, although I'm struck by the fact that she used the phrase "in this parliament" when ruling one out. That, of course, leaves the door open to a proper referendum when we know what the view looks like outside the European Union, somehow happening in another parliament, regardless of who's prime minister. But the bottom line that she's always understood is that there's nothing she can deliver to the British public that will look for a moment better than what they've currently got. And there is the fundamental divide that is riven this country, if that's the right word to use. I think it is. The fundamental divide that has cut this country in half is she knows there's nothing she can offer that will be better. Everybody who gets involved, this is crucial, all right? Because if you're wondering why people are still turning up on your television and your radio claiming that things could be going differently, there's a very, very easy answer to that question. They've got nothing to do with delivering it. Even the charlatans like Johnson, and to a lesser extent David Davis, who had 2 years with their hands on the tiller, they had 2 years on the bridge, they had 2 years absolutely at the heart of it, rather than admit that they could deliver nothing that was better to what we already have, they've run away to start heckling again and throwing rotten tomatoes from the sidelines. I did tell you this would happen. I said in July 2016 on Twitter, Farage will be back, not as quick as the last time, because he needs a bit of time out before he can return claiming betrayal. They're so predictable, as deceitful as they are predictable. The belch of beery flatulence made flesh. So easy to read. And there he is now, popping up again last night on the telly, claiming that things could be going differently. Why didn't they book someone who actually has experience of negotiating with the European Union, who actually has knowledge of these matters, who actually has evidence-based truths to share? because BBC Balance demands that uncomfortable truths are balanced out with ignorant lies. That's what balance looks like. And the ignorant lies are still lying ignorantly, but they're doing it again from the sidelines. They've resigned from the Foreign Office. They've resigned from the actual Secretary of State for exiting the European Union, and they're still claiming from the wings that things could be going any differently. They couldn't. Crashing out with no deal is an undiluted disaster. Any deal that Theresa May signs will look worse than what we currently have. It will possibly assuage small minorities that combine to support various different ideas. People still don't know what backstop means. They still don't understand the difference between the customs union, the single market, and neither. They haven't read the Good Friday Agreement. They haven't read the impact assessments in the House of Commons library, nor have journalists, to the eternal shame of this profession. But the bottom line is this. Theresa May now has to kick the can again. And even I'm beginning to wonder whether we'd be better off taking our medicine now, whether we would actually just be better off. Because I don't think these hecklers are ever going to shut up. I don't think these backseat drivers are ever going to stop trying to grab the steering wheel or shouting their ludicrous instructions. Why don't you move into 11th gear? The car's only got 4 gears. Doesn't matter. Book him. Stick him on the BBC tonight. He's got a theory that we should be in 11th gear now in this car. There is no car with 11 gear. Doesn't matter. Put him on. That's balance. So here's a bloke who explains how cars work, and here's a bloke who explains that cars can actually fly if you just believe enough. And they both get equal treatment. They both get equal weight. You want proof of this? Just talk to one of them about whether or not people who voted to leave the European Union should be able to change their mind. Now they know more. And then ask Boris Johnson what happened in December when he signed up to the first sort of tranche of the withdrawal agreement. Oh, I didn't understand it. I've changed my mind. Hang on a minute. You're Foreign Secretary, and you're allowed to change your mind about foreign policy. I'm a window cleaner. I'm a car salesman. I'm a radio host. This isn't my job. Why aren't I allowed to change my mind? Your job as Foreign Secretary is to understand this stuff and explain it to people and get the best possible arrangements for Britain. You ran away like a mewling, puking child. You ran away because you wouldn't own your lies. And now you're claiming that you misunderstood, but other people who misunderstood what you were selling because you lied, they're not allowed to change their mind. They don't get a refund, but you get to reverse ferret on this, Boris Johnson? Man alive. What happens next? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. What's the more substantive question that I'm asking? I guess, now that the evidence is utterly incontrovertible, you've got, for the record, Moldova nixing our application to the procurement part of the World Trade Organization. You've got Lithuania explaining that Theresa May stands in the room not knowing what her own position is. So how the hell can they negotiate with someone who doesn't know what their own position is? You've got Emmanuel Macron laying down the law on what will happen in the event of no deal. It's pretty scary stuff. A visa to go to France, veterinary checks, all sorts of odd stuff that you didn't realise was part of European Union membership. But what is going to happen next? It's almost as if the truth and the myth still haven't fully engaged with each other. And I've got a horrible feeling that although it is inevitable and in the circumstances the best available course to take, I've got a horrible feeling that extending the transition period extends or postpones still longer the moment of truth, when the myth that Boris Johnson and Farage and Gove and Davis and Fox and Dorries and this absolute catalogue of calumny, the myth that they sold will eventually have to crash into the truth. What's really confusing now is that the truth is really easy to see and understand. Everybody else understands it, from Moldova to Lithuania to Paris to Frankfurt. They all understand it. And there's my question, finally. I knew it would pop out at the end. Why don't we? 0345 6060 973. Why do you think this country still labours under the illusion that leaving the European Union can be done in any circumstances that would be demonstrably and measurably superior to being in it? What's your answer to that question? And I stress again, although I appreciate for some people I'm wasting my breath, clever people get conned too. 10:18 is the time. And here's the Prime Minister of Lithuania. We do not know what they want. They do not know themselves what they really want. That's the problem. If you have a negotiator who has no strong mandate, it's very difficult to negotiate. How can the rest of the world see this, but significant swathes of this country still can't? 0345 6060973. Ben's in Florence in Italy. Ben, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James. Yes, I am. I've been living in Italy for the last 25, 30 years.
Traitor.
Seeing it from the other side of the barricade.
Yes.
Hearing about visas is very, very frightening. Even though I'm permanently here, unfortunately I've not obtained Italian citizenship yet. It's something I'm working on. Fortunately, I don't have to give up my British citizenship and can have dual citizenship in Italy.
Which you couldn't do if you were in Spain, for example.
That's
I mean,
correct,
we learn something new every day, don't we? But of course, it's arguably a little bit too late to help anyone.
Mm-hmm. It's still a long process here. It's a 2-year process to obtain citizenship. They don't ask you to learn the Italian national anthem, fortunately, but you need to be permanently resident here and have no criminal record and have.
So you're closer. You've got your face up against the window of reality, then, because it is actually your daily existence that could potentially be profoundly affected.
Although I live and work in Italy, I live and work with Americans and English people in my job, so it still affects my work to some extent. I organise weddings for people who come here to be married in Italy. And I can see there are going to be some changes for them. But I mean, my main concern has been over the last 2.5 years following this tragedy from afar is things like pension and health service and also with the current political situation in Italy, although I'm still applying for citizenship, there's quite a possibility with Salvini and the current government they may turn around and say no.
Get infinitely harder, of course it could. And of course, when that word migrant, which doesn't actually mean people like you, when politicians like Salvini say it, any more than it does when fascists in this country say it.
My town of Pistoia, just outside of Florence, is we have a big community of North Africans and Libyans and from people from all sorts of different countries from Northern Africa. Up until now, there was a clear distinction between comunitario, people from Europe, of which I was part, and people from other parts of the world. And now England is the same as somebody from Senegal. So that's the current situation.
So, what the question is today. How in your view, from your seat, which is in a very different part of the stadium from mine, how come the myth is still alive when reality is becoming irresistible to everybody from Lithuania to... Go on.
I think people are still seeing the myth. I think the myth is still 1950s Great Britain, the Crown, the production of our industry, our heritage, our culture, our dominance of the rest of the world, all things which no longer exist. But obviously, in some way, popular culture gives people the idea that Britain is still great, and people obviously feel that they belong to a great nation. They feel like the last 20 years...
But they're not mutually... I mean, believing that Britain is a great place and being a member of the European Union are not mutually exclusive. You mean you need an extra sentence? You mean they believe that Britain is great enough to somehow defy reality?
Absolutely,
yes.
Absolutely. I think Britain is great.
If you only believe
on its own, that it is a part of Europe.
You believe more. You believe more. Why don't we just tell Boris Johnson that he needs to believe more in the Irish backstop?
I have no idea. I have great difficulty understanding the whole concept of the Irish backstop. Seeing it from far, hearing different opinions from one side of the aisle and the other. I think politically there's a huge agenda behind everything that everybody's saying.
I don't even know if there is anymore. There's a producer there's a producer at Good Morning Britain who tweeted this morning that he has detected a change in mood in Brussels. Where once there was sympathy and a degree of befuddlement, now there's impatience because, of course, it's not just us. We harm ourselves, but of course we harm all of our former partners and allies as well, and they have now run out of patience with us. And one of his contacts in Brussels said that the whole country will suffer so that 2 men can get richer, but he won't tell me which 2 men his confidential source was talking about. So that doesn't look like a political plan. Boris Johnson has always been about Boris Johnson, so he's just manoeuvring now to see what he can do to enhance his own position. Michael Gove is being very, very quiet for a reason, because he won't own his mistake, but he is hoping still that the ball might come out.
Why doesn't our Prime Minister admit her mistake?
Well, she hasn't made a mistake. Because she didn't vote to leave. So she is the one thing she can't admit is the truth, which is this is an absolutely ridiculous idea. My job is to...
Indirectly asking for an extra year is doing exactly that, though, isn't it? It's like saying there's no way I can achieve what I've been promising to achieve.
Well, what has she been promising to achieve, though, Ben? If you stop and think about it.
Absolutely. I mean...
she's been promising to deliver precisely the hollow sound bites that all of the liars and the cheerleaders have been punting for years. Control our money, our borders and our laws. And as any fool know, it takes two questions to dismantle that entire house of cards. So I don't know what her... I think she was waiting for the public's penny to drop on a grander scale than it has. I don't know. But then, or is she just trying to keep the Conservative Party intact when it's hell-bent upon tearing itself to shreds? I hope your personal situation isn't as bad as it could be. And, of course, pointing out what it could be like is not the same as predicting that it will be. I'll say again, clever people get conned too. 10:28 is the time. Jason is in Westminster. Jason, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. The answer to your question, why are people still not believing it? It is the perfect storm of the media, vested interests, and the politically uneducated or disenfranchised.
But you can't describe Michael Gove as politically uneducated or disenfranchised. So you describe him as a vested interest, would you?
Yeah,
Michael Gove being, of course, the man that interviewed Donald Trump with Rupert Murdoch in the room, but declined to tell any of the readers of the Times that Rupert Murdoch had been in the room.
Yeah. And I think that if you look at the kind of propaganda and you start really digging into the way Goebbels behaved and his techniques about aiming propaganda at the disenfranchised.
Yeah, but I get that, and I'm a little wary of Godwin's law and reaching too quickly. But Goebbels was very clever on what you need to do to manipulate a population. You need to tell them there's an enemy, you need to tell them the enemy is threatening them, and you need to tell them that the only way that you can fight this enemy is to surrender many of your own rights and privileges and all join forces to fend off the dragons and the evil unicorns. But Goebbels and Hitler had a plan. They wanted to take over the world. What is the plan of these liars?
I think the plan of the vested interest is to deregulate and to go down to the common lowest.
To dismantle workers' protections, to get rid of rights in the workplace, to remove the kind of regulations that would see events like the Grenfell Tower tragedy occur much more frequently. And they want to do that because there's a lot more profit left over if you're allowed to build tower blocks out of cheap, dangerous materials.
Yeah, I think something like that.
And
food. Most of the European legislation that affects us here in the UK is actually of social benefit.
You see, Trump told Theresa May that we'll have to surrender our food regulations, something that I suggested a month ago, and Liam Fox, of all people, told Ian Dale was nonsense. Donald Trump has now actually said it to Theresa May.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, being neoliberal means to actually remove the rules and regulations that stand in the way of profitability. And I think that the present executive that we have are hell-bent on achieving more and more deregulation.
I still refuse to believe that they all are. I still refuse to believe that everybody who sees themselves as a, quote, Brexiter actually wants these regulations. No, you've already answered that question. That's the Goebbels bit, isn't it? You persuade people to hurt themselves by convincing them that there's a massive enemy at the gates that's about to march in and nick all their jobs and women and... Oh, yeah. And my new catchphrase for the next chapters of Brexit is clever people get conned too, OK? We need to move away from this notion that everybody who voted to leave the European Union was a dope. Clever people get conned too, OK? So what are they saying today? They're saying, well, look, let's just get out now and get under WTO rules and everything will be fine. Here's some news from the World Trade Organization. The UK's post-Brexit access to $1.7 trillion in public projects relies on the goodwill of its European neighbours. Too bad, writes Bryce Bashuk in the Bloomberg news site today. Too bad Moldova holds a grudge. So remember, Michael Caine, why is anyone asking Michael Caine what he thinks about Brexit? You might as well ask him what he thinks about particle physics. But Michael Caine today has come out with that line again about I'd rather be a poor master than a rich servant. He's under the impression that we somehow have more freedom. Here is Moldova exercising the power of veto over our accession to the World Trade Organization's government procurement agreement. So this is the terms and conditions under which a country is able to bid for public contracts in other countries. So there's $837 billion worth of public contracts in the American market alone. And guess who, along with Moldova, is objecting to the terms that we've suggested should allow us to join the World Trade Organization's government procurement agreement? Go on, have a guess. It's not just Moldova. There's other countries as well that are unhappy with our current proposal. Yeah, America and New Zealand and Japan and South Korea and Ukraine and Israel. So those are countries expressing concern. For now, again, I stress, clever people get conned too. This could change, probably will pass. But in terms of control, America, New Zealand, Japan, South Korea, Ukraine, Israel and Moldova are expressing concern that the UK's application didn't pass muster. And they all have the power to veto it. So if you are someone clever who got conned and you are currently reaching for that fig leaf that these fraudsters and snake oil salesmen will still be serving up for you, your new fig leaf is, let's get out now. And I'm going to stop doing funny voices. If you catch me doing funny voices, then please point it out and I will stop because it's not helpful. If you are subscribing to the fig leaf that says, let's get out now and get under WTO rules, we'll be fine. And I am no longer cross with you for saying that or believing that, because people who are ostensibly much more qualified than you are saying exactly the same things. What's the point of me monstering someone on the other end of the phone for simply repeating what a lying foreign secretary has said? Okay? So if you are saying, let's get out now and get under WTO rules, you need to absorb the fact that Moldova has the power to veto our joining of the WTO's procurement agreement. Complicated words, complicated principles, but I think that's fairly simple to understand. We don't have control. The idea that you can't have control. It's like going into a shop. This seems to be where Brexit has led many decent people. You think you're allowed to go into a shop and decide whether, not just how much you're going to pay for everything in that shop, but whether you're going to pay at all. Your freedom is not curtailed by being told that these are the rules of shopping. You see what I mean? Unless you just want to build your own shop and spend the rest of your life swapping apples with your neighbour. That's our alternative. Peter's in, is it Gillingham or Gillingham? I always get confused.
Gillingham, James, but thank you. I've been on a couple of times before with you.
I know you have, and I always get confused. Where's Gillingham?
It's in Kent.
And where's
Brexit Central?
Where's Gillingham?
Oh, there's no Gillingham.
There's no Gillingham at all. Are you sure about this?
That's in Dorset, but I think they say Gillingham, or they might do a funny accent.
I don't know. Anyway, carry on, Peter. What's going on? Why is the myth still almost as heavily inflated as the truth?
Well, I think it comes down to the sort of way that the government treats the law. If I didn't read terms and conditions on a contract, a man with a wig, in other words, a lawyer, would say in Latin, toughest luckus, or something like that.
Toughest luckus?
I have got an O-level in Latin, but that isn't Latin, of course.
So have I. It was a very long time ago. What would it be? Fortis is strength. What's luck? Oh, I can't remember.
Ask Jacob Rees-Mogg, I think.
He won't know. Did you see what he was saying about Handel the other day? Handel didn't need freedom of movement to come to this country and write the Messiah. No, he needed an entire Act of Parliament, you mewling pencil. But don't talk to me about Jacob Rees-Mogg.
To be serious, then. So,
yes.
If I got the terms and conditions wrong, I'd be told, tough luck, really.
Yeah, what's your
This
mouth?
government ignores the law, as demonstrated by the numerous legal challenges that have been taken in the last 2.5 years, and the Dunning-Kruger effect does rule in Westminster.
This is the theory that posits the notion some people are so lacking in intellectual acuity that they don't actually realise they're lacking in intellectual acuity. Dunning-Kruger is a bit complicated. We could call it the Nadine Dorries effect. People who are too stupid to realise how stupid they are.
I think you should patent that, actually,
Yes.
now you've said it.
Good idea.
But, I mean, there are huge doses of cognitive dissonance going on, as evidenced by the fact that
But we're sneering now. You can sneer at Nadine Dorries and Jacob Rees-Mogg because they've stuck their head above the parapet politically. I don't want to sneer at the people that they've conned anymore. That's not working. These people are not responding to the realities that you described, to the truths that you mentioned.
No, but I was in a cafe yesterday with a man that said to me, get over it, we're out. And I said to him, I expect you voted to get back control of your laws, borders and money, didn't you? He said, yeah. I said, your money's worth 20% less. You're going to get Trump law, which he sneered at. I said, you chlorinated chicken. He said, what the hell is that? And I said, your borders will still be open, because even the Indian Prime Minister has said he wants that as part of a trade deal. I said, so you're not getting what you wanted. I said, I'm very unhappy about the fact we were lied to, and eventually kind of thought, oh, I didn't know that. But my goodness, that takes a long time to get round to.
So what's Theresa May up to then? Is she just trying to buy another bit of time in the hope that the clouds will clear and the pennies will drop?
Well, as you know, I voted Remain.
I didn't know that.
Actually, for the first time, I'm disappointed, because I run a business, and the impact of time on business is that there'll be more decisions to leave the country, and there'll be nothing left.
But this is the prolonging of uncertainty, which I agree with you. It feels like that's the worst of all possible worlds. But surely it's better than actually hitting March the 29th and everything ending, all of these treaties, everything from aviation right through to veterinary rules, just suddenly ceasing overnight.
The contraction of the time runs the risk that some idiot will just crash out. I do have faith in the vast majority of the quiet people in Westminster, and in fact today I'm going to the Bank of England to sing to the Bank of England about Brexit at 5 o'clock, and I'll be talking about money, 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 and it isn't about the money according to some people, but of course it is if you're Jacob Rees-Mogg. So in fact, we're going to have to suffer this for the few, not the many.
Well, it's a vanishingly small number of people who will actually benefit. You will have to be heavily invested in companies that will make more profits as a result of regulations and rights being taken away from workers and consumers, or you will have to be betting very, very heavily against the pound and hoping that it plummets when the full impact of Brexit is finally realised. And lots of people are. I mean, the list of people who made a killing on the night of the actual vote should have been the point at which people's eyes were opened, but they weren't, and I no longer know why. Peter, thank you. Gillingham is indeed in Dorset. It's famous for not being Gillingham in Kent. Darren is in Tullamore in Ireland. Darren, what would you like to say?
Hello, James. How are you?
I'm grand, thanks, Darren. What's on your mind?
I was just listening to your very interesting comment about cognitive dissonance. I think it kind of goes farther than that. I think it comes down to laziness on the part of your own politicians, and I hope I don't sound disrespectful when I say this.
Well, don't worry if you do. You're in good company.
No, my argument is very simple. It's very easy to blame Europe.
Yes.
It's Europe's fault, because I don't then have to go into Parliament, I don't have to go in as a politician and make legislative change in your own country.
Yes.
To then actually bring about and fix the problem. And we've got a very good example in Ireland of, say back in the 90s, we had a serious asylum-seeking epidemic, for want of a better word. Like, I used to work as a prison officer in a prison in Dublin called Mountjoy, and we literally had women who used to fly in labour into Ireland, because the problem with the Irish Constitution was that once you had your child in Ireland, you had automatic citizenship rights.
Okay.
Now, that wasn't Europe's fault.
No.
That was a problem within our own written constitution. It was a problem with our own legislation. Parliament changed that, referendum changed that, and all of a sudden this influx of asylum seekers dissipated.
Really? I mean, I know exactly who you're addressing. You're addressing people whose buttons get pushed by stories about asylum seekers getting citizenship. I mean, personally, I'd be perfectly comfortable for these people to have citizenship. I know you're not. You're addressing the people who are, though, aren't you? You're pointing out to them that they've swallowed two lies. Number one, that their life is going to be damaged by some woman giving birth in Dublin and the kid getting citizenship. But more importantly, the idea that this is a reality that has been hoisted and foisted upon them by Brussels. Why do other countries... I mean, why is Ireland so different from the United Kingdom? Why haven't Irish governments blamed domestic problems on...
They do, but I think people see through it. We would have other scenarios. It's going to sound minimal, but we cut a lot of turf in Ireland on bogs, and an EU directive came down to say that certain parts of the country couldn't cut their turf.
Yes.
And, the easy answer was, it's an EU directive, right? That's not stopping local politicians, local people saying, get out there and get it changed.
No, I know it isn't.
That's your job. And the problem I think I see is that, okay, does a British politician say, right, okay, now I actually have to go in and do my job?
Yeah.
I actually have to change, maybe reasons.
I don't want to... Go on, no, you carry on. I've talked enough today.
If you look at countries like Sweden, like Belgium, they have fairly strict... You can come into the country, okay, but to get access to... social services, things like that.
Yes.
They have their own rules and regulations, as does Ireland.
See, this
not
is
governed by Europe.
This is, I mean, when I finally get around to assembling my greatest hits of Brexit, that of course, all of these snake oil salesmen and shysters and racist liars who make up a significant contingent of the flotsam and jetsam that we've sent into the European Parliament in Strasbourg, but they should know more about the rules of living and working in Belgium than you and I do, shouldn't they? Because they...
But I also think there's a problem in that there's a definition of all Britishness, which is fine, which is cosseted and viewed with through rosy tinted glasses by people who sit in a very privileged position, who don't actually realise that on the ground Britishness is a very flux thing, like it is in Ireland.
Yes, of course, and I mean, this is, I guess, part of the problem, isn't it? Is this the sense of self is emotional, and not even historical. It's not based on real history, and that is where the idea comes from, that somehow by believing you can change the facts of the matter. But then why isn't Boris Johnson just trying harder to believe that the Irish backstop isn't a piece of cake? Why, surely if he just believes it more, then the solution will emerge. It's 10:47. Yes, you're right. Someone on the programme did just coin the phrase Brexit for the few, not the many. Interesting to take calls from Tullamore and Florence as well this morning, because I think in answer to the question of how have we ended up still seeing the myths afforded the same weight and importance as the truth. The truth is now irresistible, you know. It's now crystal clear, and yet still people will be texting me saying, we need to get out now and get under WTO. The levels of ignorance are astonishing, but as I've said a few times today, clever people get conned too, and you can't blame Doris in Ongar for ringing me up and saying that we need to get out of the EU and get under WTO rules, or saying that the Irish border is fixable, or parroting that line about nothing is agreed until everything is agreed, and completely failing to understand what it means. You can't monster Doris in Ongar for ringing me up and saying stuff like that if Boris Johnson has been saying it on the telly. Boris Johnson's latest position is that when he signed up to the backstop agreement last December, he didn't understand it, so he wants to change his mind. That would be funny, wouldn't it, if it wasn't so serious? It's the polar opposite of the position he adopts when it is suggested that now we know an awful lot more about what Brexit actually means, we perhaps should be free to change our mind, to offer informed consent for it, or indeed to withdraw consent. But they seem terrified of that prospect. I'm not entirely sure why. They're not all going to make money out of it. They're not all going to make capital out of it. Some people today suggesting, why can't Ireland be like Switzerland? Schengen? The way that they're now pretending freedom of movement wasn't an integral part of what got them over the line. Again, an awful lot of people who voted to leave the European Union did not do so for reasons of immigration. But none of them can pretend that they would have won if immigration hadn't been weaponised. Do you remember that poster that the belch of beery flatulence made flesh unveiled on the day that Joe Cox was murdered by a white supremacist terrorist? Tell me now that those kind of Goebbels-esque propaganda exercises did not in any way influence the vote to leave the European Union. I've taken calls off people who say they voted for Brexit because there were too many brown faces in the Uxbridge Tesco. So how come the lies are still getting the air that the truth is getting? And that's why Florence and Tullamore and other calls from outside this bubble are so interesting. How we look to the rest of the world. I've just retweeted, if you're interested, something from what I think is the German equivalent of I Got News for You, but don't worry, it's subtitled. Essentially making the point, and this is how we look now to the rest of the world. There's some footage of Angela Merkel delivering a speech in which she feels the need to explain to us, to you and to me, and to Theresa May and all the rest of them. She actually feels the need to say these words. I presume the translation is accurate. You'll forgive me if it isn't. You cannot be in the single market if you are not a member of the single market. So the German Chancellor thinks that the British Prime Minister needs to be reminded of that fact. It's very funny, the clip that I've just retweeted from someone else's account. So that's the question. How are we still pretending? Why are we still pretending that there's a balance here, that there is something on that side of reality that balances out what is clearly on this side of reality? Is it just that there's so much at stake, so many reputations and careers, not just the politicians, but the people in my line of work as well? Still punting out nonsense, still bloviating and evading and fibbing and masquerading and highlighting ignorance and weapons-grade levels of misunderstanding? Is it just because to step back now and say, I'm really sorry, I got that completely wrong, I had no idea it was going to be like this? I wonder if I'd gone the other way, I probably wouldn't be able to do that either. So again, in this new spirit of unity and communication, again, how do you help people realise they've made a massive, massive mistake? And remember, clever people get conned too. Non-racists get conned too. But who's left? Sean's in Hampstead. Sean, what would you like to say?
Yes, good morning, James. Here we go again. Yeah, I mean, people can only make decisions or have beliefs based on what they are told. And the problem is, I mean, I'll give you a quick example. Yesterday, the Institute for Fiscal Studies, run by a guy called Paul Johnson, they came out with a report which basically said that had we voted the other way, the economy would be £40 billion bigger than it is, now, because we voted to leave. And we haven't left yet, obviously. So that's 2%, that's 40 billion. Yeah,
but the Institute for Fiscal Studies is... Hang on a second. Hang on. You know how that works. That is an independent, quotes, think tank, end quotes, that has no political axe to grind. As far as I know, again, I'm open to correction on that, but if this was the BBC, or indeed some programmes here, you'd have the Institute of Fiscal Studies bloke with no axe to grind and no agenda and a completely transparent model of funding. Then you get someone on from the Taxpayers Alliance to poo-poo it all and to punt a completely contrary line while simultaneously refusing to disclose who pays their wages. That's how it works.
Is this report from the IFS highlighted in all the right-wing papers today?
I don't know. I haven't had time to go through them all. I got the first copy of my new book yesterday from the publisher, so I've been reading that all morning.
Well, of course you would. Well, why wouldn't you, James?
That's a very good point. And it does actually address the issue of the Taxpayers Alliance as well. It's in the epilogue. But hang on, I think you've got possibly more faith in human nature than I've got at the moment, and I'm on a journey now to restoring my faith in human nature, because you think that if there were objective news sources more readily available, then more people would realise quicker the error that the country has made. But you've heard the rhetoric that just poo-poos them. Fake news, Project Fear, these are phrases designed by liars to make the people that tell the truth look like liars. I don't know how you fight them.
Another fact, which is, again, people lie about this. You'll get the Brexiteers to say, if we have no deal and we have WTO rules, that'll kind of sort out the Northern Irish border. It won't.
Quite the opposite.
There will be a hard border.
No, of course it will. It becomes a constitutional requirement. It doesn't. It's not even a negotiation. It absolutely becomes.
You cannot have a preferential arrangement between Northern Ireland. It's not allowed. So therefore, for them to, in a fatuous, totally lying way, to say, oh, well, WTO rules, I'll sort that out. It won't. But can I say one final thing, which is you actually said, you said that you were kind of coming round to the point that maybe we just need to stop fighting this and let it happen. It's going to be an absolute catastrophe.
Not really, no. I mean, that was a caution. It was a dipping a toe in the water of showing people what happens when they...
Can I tell you why I've got a little bit of sympathy with that?
Yeah, of course you can.
Although I think it's terrible. The reason I have some sympathy with that is because unless that happens, and you did allude to this, you're going to have the Farages of this world, the Andrea Jenkins of this world, the absolute nutters. They are going to be saying...
Well, they will be doing that anyway. They'll be doing that anyway. Even if it all goes ahead, they'll still be there throwing their rotten tomatoes and claiming that things could have gone better if we only, tapped our heels together and kept repeating there's no place like home, there's no place like home. Racist liars will not stop being racist liars, whatever happens regarding Brexit. But yeah, I mean, for non-racist liars who still think it's a good idea, maybe the only way they'll realise it isn't is to go through with it. My first tweet in German of the day. Are we ready for this? Es ist komisch. Klaas die einzige Sendung in den britischen Medien, in der man faktbasierte Informationen über den Brexit finden kann. Ein Talkradio ist, der man besteht auf Nachprüf. Ivan's not here today. He'd probably be able to help me out with the pronunciation. Keith, I'm presuming this isn't your... Not a clue. It's too big. Nachprüfbar Fakten. Excuse me. Wie es scheint, ist das ungewöhnlich in GB. I'm just going to press translate tweet now, and we'll find out whether or not I've just insulted the entire nation and used words that are absolutely unacceptable at 4 minutes after 11 on a Thursday morning, even if they are foreign. Here we go. It is funny that the only broadcast in the British media where one can find fact-based information about the Brexit is on talk radio. This man insists on verifiable facts. It seems this is unusual in Great Britain. Thank you very much. That's how we look from Germany. David's in Ealing. David, I was in Ealing yesterday, and I have to tell you, David, despite having lived in Chiswick for many years, I had, up until today, or yesterday, been a little bit unaware of the many, many charms of Ealing.
Yeah, it's really nice.
It's a beautiful little corner of the capital. But anyway...
Oh, yeah, and just on one note, I remember a while ago you mentioned that Polish Chinese shop. It's both Polish and Chinese. It's not like pierogi chicken fried rice.
That's on Hanger Lane.
Yeah.
Yeah, someone else explained to me that it's not actually fusion food. It's got two menus. It's got a Polish menu and a Chinese menu. I got overexcited about the idea of multiculturalism having led us to a place where someone was punting a Polish-Chinese fusion menu in West London. So I'm clear now that wasn't true. Carry on.
Well, we've got a Soviet shop in South Ealing, so...
Not for long, mate. Yeah. Now, what did you want to say?
Yeah, I think it's more to do with our country's kind of misguided view of ourselves and our place in the world.
Yes.
When you think about it, your view of yourself, whether it be an individual or a nation, determines so much. It determines what you define as success and failure, what you define as fair and unfair, what you define as punishment. And I think punishment is really key, because in Brexit there's a lot of talk of punishment, EU punishing us, so on.
There is in the dark corners of the country where where misunderstanding is still endemic.
It goes into the wider point I'm trying to make.
Yes.
So a while back you were talking about Jeremy Corbyn saying we should learn more about history of the empire, and people were upset. And then you said, okay, let's just say you should learn more about Britain. That's not controversial. But people were still pushing back against it. And I think that kind of mentality that history should be an exercise in fostering patriotism as opposed to just learning about history has fostered this kind of ignorance. Now, for example, if you were to go to Germany or France, similar-sized countries, and you were to say, look, you're a big, successful country, you're very popular, you're, very rich, intelligent, but you are not equal to 27 other European countries combined. If you're in a negotiation by yourself, you would not have as much leverage as
wouldn't really cross your mind, would it? Yeah,
not because you're stupid, but because in this continent, in this century, everyone is unique, but no one is special. There are no chosen people of Europe, But for some reason here, with regards to that they need us more than we need them, it was all about cars and wines. It wasn't about this notion that, no, there are no chosen people. And you keep talking about reality. What kind of reality must a society have for you to be in a situation where the notion that there is no country in Europe that is equal to or greater than 27 other European countries is somehow controversial or patriotic?
Let's have a look. I'm just going to have a look at the LBC feed to see some of the replies to the thing that's gone out earlier. Here's someone called Ian Beach who's listening in Dubai, apparently. God, the gammon that is O'Brien doesn't see the huge growth opportunities outside the EU club. 3 question marks. Nothing so obtuse as a staunch Remoniac. Now, I don't know if he's a real person or whether someone's sort of borrowed his brain or whether he's a bot or a sock puppet or whatever it may be, but I don't know how you break through that level of thick-headedness. And when I said that clever people get con too, I didn't want to give the impression that I'm going to start being nice to stupid people as well. I'm just recognising that not everybody on that side of the fence is stupid. Some people are stupid, which brings us back to Ian Beach. How do you break through someone that stupid?
Well, the thing is, for me,
huge growth opportunities, and you say, what are they? And they just disappear, or they start talking absolute twaddle, which displays even deeper ignorance of the WTO than they have of the EU.
But even that goes into this wider point. In terms of growth, people always talk about the Commonwealth and stuff. When, Korea knows signing a trade deal with Commonwealth Canada doesn't give you access to Commonwealth Australia. Failing to sign a trade deal with Commonwealth Britain does not restrict your access to Commonwealth India.
No, of course it doesn't.
It's this ignorance of the world we're in. And for me...
Do you try to... Can I run something by you, actually?
Okay.
Because I think this might be significant. Christopher Columbus and Vasco da Gama, right?
Christopher Columbus, yeah.
You know that the Spanish had a massive empire. That's why most of South America speaks Spanish. The Portuguese had a massive empire.
Yeah.
But I don't think that Spain and Portugal in modernity still feel nostalgia's not a strong enough word. Do you think our empire is just still a little bit... Hang on, I haven't finished yet. I'm trying to get this out, mate. Give us a chance, all right? Is it because our empire is still too recent that we don't recognise it's over?
Actually, that's a very key point.
Yeah.
You see when people say we used to do it by ourselves?
Yes.
And going back to the Jeremy Corbyn thing, you were talking about the railways in India.
Yes.
And we were saying the Indians are not taught that the railways were built for them. They were taught that they were built to take their resources out. Our history is not exclusively British. It's also Indian. It's
and
also
of course
Kenyan.
It is. Of course it is. And Irish and Scottish. And
yes.
I mean, you did say British, not English.
You ask someone from an ex-colony, just to be clear, this is not evil Britain or anything like that, but you ask someone from an ex-colony if before joining the European Union, Britain was by itself. I'm not just talking about the world wars.
Yeah, it's a very good point. It's a really good point.
This mentality that we simultaneously say they are
Jamaican Spitfire pilots, tank commanders. I mean, what is this Britain that they speak of?
Yeah.
It's the one that won the Second World War without any interventions from America.
No, whether it be Australia, Canada, wherever. And just to make a point about the punishment, I want you to promise me something. You still do it sometimes when people call in and say, okay, I don't like this law, and you ask them to say the law they don't like.
Just one, David.
Yeah, but they don't do it.
Yeah, but just one, though. Give me a favourite. Go on.
My favourite one, we won't be in Eurovision Song Contest anymore. And then you say, oh, that has nothing to do with the EU. And you're like, oh, okay, sorry. But anyway, yeah, in terms of punishment.
Yes.
Now, when somebody talks about punishment, this even goes into what I was saying.
Go on.
Ask them to define what they mean by punishment. Now, for example, normally...
But you know what they mean. You know what they mean. I know what they mean. When they say punishment, they mean they're applying their rules.
Yes, but it goes into this warped view of the world we're in. Normally, punishment is being treated unfairly and unequally. So, for example, country X can do this, so we don't like you, you can't do this. But whenever punishment is brought up in terms of Brexit, it normally comes after... We've been told, yes, you'll get a bespoke deal, but it won't be any different from anyone else. You'll be treated equally. So it's almost like our definition of punishment is being treated the same. I know. Britain,
that's exceptionalism in a nutshell. Actually, I'm nicking that. I'm passing that off as my own. I'll put it in my next book. You're absolutely right. We call rules that we see rules that apply equally to everybody as being unfair because we shouldn't be treated equally.
Yes, it really. Whenever it is brought up, it's only after some comment has been made or a press conference has been released, implying that there won't be special treatment. That's the only time.
Have you phoned me before?
No.
Why not? You're brilliant.
Sorry?
Why not? You're brilliant.
Oh, it's just... when I was in the line, I was so nervous.
Mate, you should have phoned me 2 and 3 years ago. We could have stopped this nonsense together, you and me. We could have been like Batman and Robin.
I know, but it's just, I just never get time to call in, to be honest.
Too busy earning a living. I know how you feel. 12 minutes after 11 is the time you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. That's strong. They're punishing us. What do you mean? Well, they're applying the rules to us that apply to everybody else. Yeah, but that's not punishment. Yes, it is, because we're British. You must believe more. And the rules will no longer apply. Phil's been in touch from Gibraltar, another one of my favourite callers. I say another because David just became one. Phil says, as a man living in Spain, they do remember their empire. They remember their mass genocides, and it mostly embarrasses them. We whitewash our genocides and wave flags and shout Churchillian slogans. But there must be something in this. Also, the fact that we're an island nation that contributes to the sense of insularity, literally. You know, my theory that if we had road signs that had other European cities on them, we probably wouldn't have voted to leave. And I don't just mean yesterday. I mean, if we'd had 20, 30 years, in the way that when you're driving through the south of France, you will see signs for Italian cities or Swiss cities. If you were driving through Kent and it said Paris 200 kilometres or whatever, or Brussels, just regularly on when the Channel Tunnel was built, if we changed all the road signs to accommodate all the Channel Tunnel destinations as well, I think that would have just slightly popped our balloon of British exceptionalism. I really do. And that's a box fresh one there. I don't think I've put that one out on air before, because I've been thinking a lot about empire and the largely concocted and confected controversies that surround discussions about it. Sort of, the professional gammon feeders who take manufactured offence at the suggestion that we should teach children knowledge as opposed to rose-tinted retrospective exceptionalism. And I've been wondering why Spain and Portugal, which are poorer countries than us, obviously, but Spain and Portugal have had empires on an epic scale. And yet, to the best of my knowledge, having lived in neither country, they don't seem to be enthralled to the false history of their empire. The idea that, rule Britannia, Britannia rules the waves. Columbus discovered America, in a sense. Don't phone me up and tell me that, no, he didn't. There were lots of people living there already. Vasco da Gama, Portuguese, I think. These explorers who co-opted huge swathes of the globe don't seem to inform modern Spanish and Portuguese attitudes to international relations and geopolitics. And that, I think, might just be because of time. There is just a bigger window between the days when España ruled the waves than there is between now and the days when Britannia ruled the waves. So that's partly where we get our bonkers sense of national identity from. Possibly, just some food for thought. Obviously, it won't work for people who hate thinking. We will carry on with this because it is the single most important issue that will face this country war exempted, for generations. And we are doing something really, really stupid. And deep down, everybody knows that now. But the people who have been persuaded to do something really, really stupid by the people who are terrified of the EU's tax avoidance laws that are coming in January, or by people who have used immigration as a weapon with which to spook the easily spooked, or, of course, people who've just fallen for the snake oil being sold by people who are opening up funds in Dublin and investing in the pound collapsing. Apart from them, everybody knows it's daft. So why are people finding it so hard to admit? And what can we do to help? Gary's in Warrington. Gary, what would you like to say?
Hey, morning, James. How are you?
I'm all right, actually. How are you?
I'm fine.
Actually, Gary, I'm not going to lie to you, mate. I'm actually in an absolutely fantastic mood. I'm not just all right. That's a figure of speech.
That's you're reading your book.
It's not. I was toying with the idea of suggesting that this was a result of reading How to Be Right in a World Gone Wrong by James O'Brien, which is published by Penguin on November the 1st. But no, I'm just in a fantastic mood because the world is, you can get bogged down in Brexit. I work with three wonderful people. I've got Ava, Beth and Keith with me today. I had Ivan with me yesterday. I've got wonderful colleagues. Eddie Mayor's on the station now. I'm married to a wonderful woman. My kids are kicking ass all over the place. Life is pretty good. But then I remember Brexit, and I wonder why we're deliberately making things worse, Gary. So that's a slightly more detailed answer to your inquiry after my health.
Well, I'm glad I asked.
Yeah, so how are you, anyway? I want more detail from you.
It's just in regards to the question, James, why has the penny not dropped?
Yes.
And I think we're all to blame. We spit facts. In fact, this isn't a factual argument anymore. It's an emotional argument. You think about all the movies that you watch. They're all about rule Britannia. Britannia rules the waves.
Yes.
And I think that's where we're at now. You can keep on telling people they're going to be poorer. We can keep on telling them there's going to be a hard border in Ireland. But for the predominantly people, specifically in England, to be fair, they don't have that. Well, we don't have a border. It'll be fine. Everything's going to be fine, and my unicorn's coming, and I get blue passports.
We just need. It's your fault for not believing more. That's why everything's going wrong, because you're not like me. You don't let your emotions govern your brain. If you only let your emotions govern your brain more, then everything would be great. Because if everybody believes things are going to be great, somehow they will be.
Well, there's that, and unfortunately, something that we've done, and I'm a Remainer. I lived in Spain when this all kicked off in 2016. I now live back in the UK, and it's something that your Moggy boys, your beer fatulents,
yes,
they have this cornered.
This faux patriotism, which is we are going to damage our country unnecessarily because we love our country so much. It's the mother of all cognitive dissonances. Is it the same rhetoric? Because I'm thinking of spivs and charlatans. Is it the same rhetoric that sees people think they have some sort of patriotic duty to go into the trenches in the First World War and sacrifice their lives because a couple of cousins have fallen out with each other?
Yes. Massively. It's the same reason
because you kind of need that. You do kind of need that as a country. There's a huge responsibility not to take the lid off it irresponsibly, but you do kind of need. What benefit does it? Yeah. What benefit does it do to consistently? And as I said, I'm at blame just as much as anyone else in regards to spitting facts. And I think EU Supergirl and is it Femi, who I know is a fan of the show. Those two, I think, are now starting to tap into the emotional side of the argument. Yes. So Femi's went to Sunderland. He's went to Northern Ireland. Because a guy that lives, in Manchester or Leeds or, in Stoke or anywhere like that, they have no idea what it's like to be on the border in Northern Ireland. None.
They have no idea what it's like.
And it's also a challenge to make them care, remember. There's you know...
But they don't care because they weren't impacted. I think that's where I think the argument fails. Whereas they're not impacted by what happens in Northern Ireland. They don't care. And I think there's polls to suggest that a lot of Brexiteers would be quite content.
And they've said the same about Scotland. I mean, this is where the levels of... I mean, the figures of speech about chopping off two legs because you think you're going to be able to... you were persuaded that if you chopped off one leg, you'd be able to run faster than you can with two legs. It turns out you can't. You're hopping everywhere, but now you're going to chop off the other leg because that's going to make things better. That used to be a figure of speech, but they are now saying, well, we'll chop off Northern Ireland and then we'll get our country back, but the Scots might want to go too, so we'll chop off Scotland as well and then we'll get our country back. London doesn't want to be part of that country that you're describing, and London is the fuel, the engine that runs the entire nation. It's absolutely nuts, Gary. How's life in Warrington?
It's also if you think about Gibraltar, you know, they were 97%.
No one's mentioned Gibraltar. No one's even mentioned Gibraltar because they think... oh, man. Ireland.
So when you talk about borders, you know, about the fact that there's going to be a hard border in Northern Ireland and Ireland, possibly.
Yes.
We've got to obviously say possibly.
Yes.
There's already one in Gibraltar.
I know there is.
There is already one there. I lived there. I worked there. You have to show your passport. Goods have to be checked before they go into the rock.
And is this why the Prime Minister is left with little choice but to keep postponing the inevitable clash of mythology and reality? Because
that's why she has to say sound bites, James. Leeds, Brexit means Brexit, because any other argument, when it's put to a factual basis, doesn't work.
Two phrases I've coined myself that I think if you knit these two together, it does help you make sense of how we've ended up here. The first is that getting out of the European Union will be like trying to get the eggs out of a baked cake. And the second is that the minute you write it down, the plan, it falls apart. Because the minute you write it down, all of the people who are going to be disappointed by what has been agreed will have the scales fall from their eyes. Whether they're honest enough to say this could never have worked, or whether they will go down the belch of beery flatulence path and claim that, it could only have worked if people believed more, or if the racist liars had been put in charge. Whether you're going to do that or the other is moot. But the minute it's written down, everybody is disappointed. Everything falls apart because there is no plan that can be demonstrably and measurably better than being in the European Union.
No, there isn't. And as I said, it works for Trump. If you think about just across the pond, this whole nationalistic,
it does.
Stand up for the flag,
lock her up, make Mexicans a rapist, build a wall, make people feel frightened and angry. These are Trump voters think that there are parts of London that you can't go into because of Sharia patrols.
Exactly. And I think the other thing that we miss, and I think Labour has a lot to do with this, is Corbyn won't come out and say this is wrong.
No,
and until he does, and until he actually demonstrates a position of, I want a people's vote, or...
Yeah, what's that word? Begins with O. It means that you're standing against a government. What's it say? It begins with O. What's the word?
It's not orange, that's...
No, it's not orange, that's America.
Is that word? Is it opposition?
That's it. Yeah. Leader of the opposition. If the country's doing something stupid, apparently.
And I'm a lifelong Labour fan, so it hurts me to actually say.
You're not allowed to say that. If you criticise Jeremy Corbyn, mate, you can't be a lifelong Labour fan. You must be a fascist.
Exactly, but I'm like you. I'm politically homeless at the moment, and that is purely because Brexit, and it's also because Corbyn just won't come out and say the inevitable because he's scared that he'll lose 50 votes in Stoke-on-Trent.
No, I mean, to be fair, he is scared that he'll lose the kind of UKIP people who possibly were persuadable to vote for Labour, but were also persuaded to vote to leave the European Union. And whether or not he's waiting for them to realise the error of their ways, or whether or not his decision is based more on incompetence, I don't know. But it worries the life out of me when I see some people, I think it was Barry Gardner, my apologies if it wasn't, saying things like, you don't interrupt your enemy when they're making a mistake. To which my response would be, well, if my enemy is burning my house down, I'm going to interrupt them. Thank you, Gary. Great calls today. Lots of brilliant debutantes. John's in Abingdon. John, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello, John.
So I'm married to a French wife with French kids. We met in Budapest in the.
You're a citizen of no. You're one of those citizens of nowhere, aren't you?
I'm one of those, James. Yeah. That was great. Wasn't that great when she stood on the steps of Downing Street? I wrote the other day. I think that was one of the worst speeches in my living memory. An opportunity that she had at that point to try.
But did she? I got a horrible feeling I'm going to spend the next couple of years defending Theresa May as having had very few choices. Because did she have any choice but to throw red meat to the racists on that morning?
Well,
because she needed the racists to keep the whole boat afloat.
Now with hindsight,
yeah.
and I said what I said, but yeah, at the time I think you're right. She had to throw that red meat, didn't she?
Yeah, I think she did.
But all it did was further drive a wedge, I think, into the country, which I think is irreparable. Because for me, James, to answer the question you've raised today, and I'll quote Mark Twain if you don't mind. I don't know if you've heard this one before, but it's easier to fool the people than convince them that they've been fooled.
You're quite a recent convert to this show, I sense.
I am.
Yes.
I am.
That would be that. Right? I would issue that little epithet pretty much on a daily basis until the end of last year. No, don't worry. I'm always trying to come up with new catchphrases.
No, well, but that for me, you know, it's tribal, right? It's faith based.
But why is it? Why can't we reach out and put our arms around these people and say, look, we can both benefit from changing our minds, instead of you somehow pretending that you're delighted with what you've done, even though it's hurt you, because it's hurt me as well.
Well, I think because for every one of me, there's listening to you and agreeing with you, there's another one of them that...
But this isn't agreement anymore. This isn't agreement anymore. This is a list of facts. This is a list of things that are happening.
There is no arbiter for the truth out there.
No.
You know, for every opinion, every fact that you might offer up, there's another one that can be read, listened to.
Project Fear, fake news.
It is, and you know,
I know you are, but what am I?
Should have been the arbiter of that truth. They're not.
No, the BBC dropped the ball.
You know, I was listening to Farage being interviewed last night on Newsnight, and this really gets to me when we knew we voted for the customs union, we knew we voted for leaving the single market.
Such a fraud.
Even if that was true,
he said, he's on the record saying, "Why can't we be like Norway? Why can't we be like Switzerland?" That would be awful, wouldn't it? He literally lies with his eyes wide open.
But even if that was true, why does the argument always end there?
I don't know.
Even if that was true, that there was going to be something in its place, right?
Yes, of course there was. People voted for a deal. They voted for a deal. They voted for the deal that would replace the customs union and the single market membership, but now they're pretending that they didn't. That's the big mystery, isn't it? That's why you use words like tribal. If you provide, and you see it with Donald Trump as well, here is incontrovertible evidence that someone is a liar.
Yeah.
Why do you still support them? Oh, well, Hillary Clinton had her emails, or someone tried to tell me that the reason why they still trust these lies is because of Peter Mandelson the other day. So it's as if they say that I know you are, but what am I? Here's someone from your, quote, side who once told a fib. Therefore, you can't criticise the people on my side for lying through their teeth 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year.
Well, look, I'm a communications coach, and people often ask, you know, well, how on earth did Trump get to where he got? And it was... there's lots of reasons, I'm sure, but you know, there was a population like here.
Well, it's the Goebbels line. It was back to the Goebbels line. Tell them a lie big enough, persuade them that there's an enemy at the gates that they are under threat from, and tell them you're the only person that can protect them, and then chada-ching, chada-boom. You're there, you're home, you're dry. 11:32 is the time where we continue to wonder why the myths are still afforded the same weight and attention as the truth. From Lithuania to Moldova, from France to Frankfurt, it is clear, and Ireland in particular, that there is no deal available that would leave us on a better footing as a country than we currently are. Some individuals might benefit, most notably, of course, those who are worried about tax avoidance legislation that's due to kick in shortly, and or people who understand the niceties of financial markets and stand to make enormous profits when countries or currencies suffer. Bringing that about, of course, and then benefiting from it is very different from watching the world and placing a bet on something that you think will happen but have no power to influence. And it is a mystery. I suppose other people on an individual level think that they will benefit if you feel that immigration has damaged your existence and you feel that somehow the European Union is going to keep the same number of customers in the country but reduce the number of people doing the same job as you, which is obviously mathematically impossible, but it's a seductive argument to have made, then that might work as well as an individual improvement. But now that the numbers, all of the claims about trade, all of the claims about control, all of the claims about borders, all of the claims about markets, they're just not true. It's just not doable. You can leave the European Union in the same way that you can leave a car. And you can say, well, we didn't have a car until 1976 and we got around fine. You know, we were great without a car. You could use a lot of time waiting for buses, and sometimes it was really annoying. And when it was raining, it was a pain in the bum. But the world didn't end. We were fine when we didn't have a car. That's not really an argument to get out of the car, is it? The fact that when you didn't have a car, you quote, survived, which is what they're saying now. Don't worry, we'll survive. Imagine if it had said that on a bus. Vote for decades of unnecessary economic harm because we'll somehow survive. Actually, that's pretty strong, that. Just because you were fine when you didn't have a car is not a reason to take your car to the scrapyard. It just isn't, is it? Life is better with a car. It doesn't end without a car, but don't get out of the car unless you've got a better car to get into. It's absolutely clear now that there is no better car currently available. It may be that a better car becomes available at some unspecified point in the future, but right now you've got a choice. This car, that car that's not as nice, or no car at all. What are you going to choose? The car you've got, the car that's worse, or the car that doesn't exist? Mike's in Bridgend. Mike, what would you like to say?
Hello, Dave.
Hello.
I just like to say, I'm Brexiteer, but I love your show because I just...
It's a terrible phone line, Mike, which obviously is a deliberate conspiracy because you've described yourself as a Brexiteer and automatically the phone line stumbles. Can we get that back? Is he there, Mike? Try again, my friend.
Hello, James.
Hello.
I'm a Brexiteer, but I love listening to your show. But if I'm off work on holiday, so I always make sure I listen to the whole thing.
Excellent.
I do. I like the way you take people apart in terms of arguments. I think it's great.
Yes.
I'm not a big fan of Rees-Mogg. I'm not a fan of Farage. When I voted for Brexit, basically, yes. I just voted for. I just don't like. I would rather have governance as we've been governed for centuries, basically, with a parliamentary system, without actually externalising it to a European Union, which basically is just it's gradually over time, it's gradually coalescing more powers, and we don't know what it's going to become down the line. For example,
go on.
And for example, to stay, one of the biggest things I always thought was a big failing of the European Union is the way countries which didn't benefit them whatsoever, but they signed away their currency at the stroke of a pen. Unlike we didn't. Gordon Brown was sensible enough not to do that, but every other country other than Germany was quite foolish to all join the euro.
It's not a reason for us to leave it, is it? The fact that they introduced a single currency that we didn't join.
Yeah,
and in many ways, that's where David Cameron fell apart, because he went there trying to negotiate special dispensations, and they pointed out, mate, you're not in Schengen and you're not in the single currency. We've all got Eurosceptics. You've already got the best available deal of any member state, but that wasn't good enough for you.
In terms of, for example, I believe there'll be a compromise deal then. It won't satisfy Brexiteers. I think it'll be, but my whole belief is there's nothing to do with anything being said by really anything in the Brexit campaign. It's just, for example, people like Michael Heseltine say, well, at some point, I hope we'll remain in Europe and then we'll adopt the euro. And I just think that would be for Britain, that would be the single most damaging thing economically we could do. We tried to say...
Let me run something by you. What if there's a referendum on it and they say that we're going to join the euro?
If the Parliament, which is sovereign, basically says we're going to have a referendum, just like if they said we're going to have another referendum, the Parliament is sovereign, it's fine. But I'm just saying, if they said we're going to have a euro and people went for that, I'd be happy with that.
I mean, forgive me, and thank you for your politeness, but you seem to be fearful of unspecified futures.
Yeah, but I don't think not unspecified future, the possible likely future, because
it's not as likely. It's not as likely as
more likely to remain. If we remain in the European Union, I believe it's far more likely that at some point in the not too distant future, will basically join a single currency mechanism.
But why do you believe that? We have absolute power of veto. There's absolutely no circumstances in which we could be forced against our will to join.
Because the further you go in, basically, the further you.
But this is factually untrue, my friend. It is simply not the case that there will ever be a scenario in which a member state could be forced to join a single currency that it didn't want to. The only circumstances in which the United Kingdom would be compelled to join the single currency is when we crawl back in 15 years' time with our tail between our legs and beg to be let back in, and the only terms under which we will be readmitted will be as members of the Schengen Treaty and as members of the single currency. So hang on, I'm on a roll. The thing you fear the most is made more likely by Brexit.
I think the thing I fear the most is made more likely by staying in.
No, it can't be, because if we stay in, they can't make us join it. If we leave...
I'm not on about compulsion. I'm not on about compulsion. I'm on about likelihood.
Oh, so you're worried about a democratic choice being exercised, then, by British politicians?
Well, I'm just worried about likelihoods. I think if we remain in the European Union, there's a much higher likelihood that at some point we'll join the single currency. And when you do
But I've just explained to you, that will only happen if the British government wants it to happen. And a reason for supporting Brexit is supposed to be that you want British government to take decisions, not Brussels. The only people who will make a decision for Britain to join the single currency would be the British government in the absence of a plebiscite or another referendum.
I don't care. I'm supporting Brexit, not because of... If that's what the British government decides, then I'm just supporting Brexit in terms of likelihoods. I think if we remain in the European Union, it's more likely we'll join the single currency.
You've said that... No, hang on. You've said that a lot of times now, and you haven't offered up anything to support it. Except I've heard the word belief and likelihood a million times, but I haven't heard evidence or proof. Why do you believe it's more... Actually, just briefly, why do you believe it is somehow rendered more likely?
Because if you're inside the European Union, then basically the argument will be, well, why don't we... Well, as we were previously, why don't we join the single currency?
Yes, but we didn't, and no one's mentioned it since. I'm not aware of any pressure from anywhere for us to sign up to the single currency, and that's why I'm asking, are you?
But again,
who are the people you would name first? What are the loudest voices calling for Britain to join the single currency at the moment?
I don't believe anybody's calling for us to join at the moment.
Well, you're frightened, so you're frightened.
Won't they?
Well, no, you can't say I'm doing something because of something that might happen in the future, but I have absolutely...
I think you can, James.
Of course you can, because you are, but yeah. I should have added the word rationally. You are describing a possible future that precisely nobody is currently calling for.
So we'll never join the European... We'll never join the either exchange rate mechanism type thing or the euro type thing. So you can guarantee me that?
I can't guarantee you that, but I can guarantee you that if you want to rejoin the European Union after leaving for reasons based upon fear of an unlikely and unspecified future, you will have to. The only circumstances in which I can guarantee, or you can guarantee, that we would have to join the single currency, for good or for ill, I appreciate that you're a sworn enemy of it. There are plenty of people who aren't, but let's pretend you're right, and it is just awful, and anyone who joins it is an idiot. The only circumstance...
No, I never said that.
No, James. I know. I'm exaggerating for the purposes of rhetorical flourish. So
I know, but don't try and... I don't believe that at all.
So you think the people who joined it have done something clever then?
No, I don't believe Brexiteers... No, I believe myself. I'm not going to turn around and say
So how would you describe people who are in the single currency, or who support it?
I wouldn't say they're idiots.
No, just wrong. They're wrong. They're wrong. I apologise. You're right. I shouldn't have said idiots. So I just said you think they're wrong. Okay, so let's say they are. Let's say they are wrong, and that it would be a ridiculous idea to join it. You use the word guarantee. I can guarantee that if we leave the European Union and decide that we need to rejoin because of the, almost immeasurable economic harm that it's going to do to us, then I can guarantee that rejoining it would involve signing up for the single currency. So in all possible futures, the only one that is currently based on treaties and contracts, the only possible future with regard to the British membership of the single currency that is actually guaranteed and certain, the only possible future is the one that you're creating. Because if we stay in...
to leave, aren't we? So if we leave, we're not going to go back in, are we?
Keep in touch,
But James, again...
I'm late for the break, and I've enjoyed talking to you, but everything I've said is just true. It's not an opinion, and everything you've said to me is a belief, and that's fine. It's kind of where we are as a country. You believe X, I know Y, We'll be talking, I hope, soon, because it's Mystery Hour around the corner, your weekly opportunity after 12 o'clock to get an answer to whatever question has currently got you puzzled, except the one that we've been addressing for the last 2 hours, which is why, now that the evidence is utterly incontrovertible, do some people persist in insisting that their unicorn is just around the corner? And I'm getting a better handle on it, and I'm sincere when I say we need to start building bridges, not with everybody. I can't build bridges with, absolutely pig-thick racists. I've tried. Occasionally you might break through, but you can build bridges with people who have fallen under the spell of pig-ignorant racists, or who've fallen under the spell of very sophisticated racist liars who populate both politics and the media like zits upon the face of this country. But the difference between the con men and the conned is at the very heart of everything that decent people in this country should be addressing politically for the next few years. I don't know if we're going to have time to get back to that, because Theo's gone to Brussels, and it seems to me rude to not talk to him. I'm not sure what he's got to say or anything like that, but if I got on the train to Brussels this morning and Theo decided that he wasn't going to let me on his show, I'd be furious. So we'll talk to Theo in a moment, but I don't know why. I know why we're talking to Rich Loizu, who is on the line from Blackpool. We're talking to Rich. Actually, before we do, what would you go to prison for? What belief do you have? What principle, political principle, do you have that you would go to prison for? Would I go to prison if protesting against the idiocy of Brexit was somehow rendered criminal? Do you know, there's a part of me that hopes I would. Rich went to prison because he is passionately opposed to fracking, and he was released yesterday on appeal. I think we're the first media organisation you've spoken to, Rich, so thank you for that. I'll begin by asking if I did represent you correctly. I suspect that when you started protesting against fracking, you didn't really contemplate the possibility that you might end up in jail.
Good morning, James. No, I didn't. I was involved in a protest at Preston New Road last year, and quite frankly, I didn't think I would end up going to prison. No.
What happened?
I was sat on top of a lorry delivering parts into the Preston New Road site. I stayed up there for 2 days because I was getting loads of support from local residents, bringing me food and blankets and tarpaulins to keep me dry and well fed. And then when I got down, I was arrested and charged with public nuisance. And the sentence I was given was 15 months imprisonment.
15 months imprisonment for sitting on top of a lorry?
Yeah, that's correct.
I think the official line is that you disrupted the lives of residents and cost Quadrilla, the company that resumed fracking this year after being forced to stop in 2011 after causing minor earthquakes. You cost them £100,000. Why are you so passionately opposed to fracking, Rich?
I think fracking is an issue about democracy. First of all, the people of Lancashire and the County Council of Lancashire have categorically stated that they do not want this to happen. It's also an environmental issue in terms of noise and air pollution in this area and in the north, which is predominantly going to affect working class people, and then it's also a global issue of climate change, which is going to affect the poor people of the global south. So it's local and international reasons why I'm passionate about fracking, and it is just the tip of the iceberg with regard to the fossil fuel industry as well.
This is the thing, because I can muster up an argument against what you've said, and I'd be interested to see how you would respond to it. If we accept that fossil fuels will remain necessary for the short-term future, but we commit to reducing that reliance as quickly and as powerfully as possible, is there no argument at all that says while we're still going to use some fossil fuels, we may as well use fossil fuels that we can dig up in Blackpool rather than ship gas all the way from Russia?
In my opinion, really, we don't have time to delay on this. If Quadrilla was spending the 50 million that it's spent so far on this site, if that money was being used to insulate homes and to develop new technologies that are greener, I think would be moving in the right direction at the speed with which we need.
So you think that my argument is a bit of a red herring, and worse than a red herring, it kind of lets the
well, it's very much
lets
like
the companies off the hook.
It's like saying we need to stop using gas, so let's use more gas. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't get it.
No, fair enough. Finally, what was prison like? You're a piano restorer. You're not what I would necessarily describe as a career criminal.
My co-defendant was a piano restorer. I'm a teacher down in Devon.
You're a teacher. I do apologise. I've got a soil scientist. You're a teacher from London?
From Devon. Yeah,
they've got you the wrong way. In the article I'm reading, they've got you mixed up with Richard Roberts.
That's easily done with two Riches sharing the same cell.
He's the piano restorer. You're a teacher. So you're a teacher. You ended up in prison.
Yes, and you know, for me, I didn't like being in prison. It wasn't great being stuck in a small room for 23 hours a day and having to do everything in there. Yes. But I also, you know, I had a lot of support from the outside, which is something that not every prisoner had. I was in the news, and I knew I had people rooting for me, and I was getting loads and loads of support mail, which again isn't something a lot of prisoners have.
No, I guess not.
I think I had it easy compared to most of the people who are in prison because, quite frankly, because of my privilege and the support I have, and you know, it was a lot easier for me than someone from a working class background or a person of colour or something like that.
Don't answer this question if you don't want to. I don't want you to incriminate yourself, but is it beyond the realms of possibility that I'm going to see you sitting on top of another lorry in Blackpool anytime soon?
I was given a conditional discharge, so for 2 years I'm going to be acting in mainly support roles. And for supporting people who make these actions. You will see me this Saturday at a mass demonstration outside Preston New Road.
It's a lot of competition on Saturday. There is, of course, people gathering on Park Lane just north of the Hilton Hotel to embark upon the People's March. Principals at both ends of the country. Rich Loiseau, many thanks indeed for your time. I hope you're enjoying your freedom. We've got Theo Ashwood in Brussels. And I'm going to be late for the news. And I don't want to interrupt mystery. Theo, be brilliant but brief.
I'll be brilliant but brief. I've been speaking to Richard Ashworth, former Conservative, kicked out of the party when he said not enough progress was being made today. Today he had a big smile on his face.
The backstop, therefore, was going to be in place until such time as a solution was found. Backstop, jargon here now becoming long stop, because it would take an awfully long time before you resolve that.
So, in effect, it's the status quo. It's no longer the backstop. It's what's going to happen.
Unless you want to leave the single market and customs union and put it back in place of border.
But the government said they're not going to do that.
But then the government also said it was going to have global Britain. You can have one, you can have the other, but you can't have both.
So they're going to have to accept the backstop or the long stop?
Provided Westminster would agree to it. And it was my understanding that all that up to last Sunday, was on the table. But Dominic Raab came out and only had an hour-long meeting to say, no, that's not acceptable back in England, and that's why we are precisely right back where we were over 12 months ago, which again, I remind you, is why I'm not now in the Conservative Party.
It's a bit of a mess, isn't it?
It always was going to be, but this is what we were promised, quote, the easiest negotiation in history.
Richard Ashworth, James, is a big fan of yours. He had he had the LBC app on his phone listening to you as I walked into his office. Another person I spoke to, Molly Scott-Cato, the Green MEP, she's written to the Metropolitan Police and was rebuffed by the Metropolitan Police after she asked them to investigate vote leave.
Just because cabinet ministers broke the law doesn't mean that those crimes shouldn't be investigated. Nobody's above the law. We heard that the Met had been told that this was politically sensitive and they were stalling the inquiry. The legislators, the people that are representatives like me, have to defend the rule of law, and we said we don't want political pressure at the Met.
And do you think there is political pressure at the Met?
Well, they said so themselves. Worrying times. Are we becoming a banana republic? What is Brexit doing to our democracy? People should be asking themselves these questions.
That was Molly Scott-Cato there. We're becoming a banana republic.
You need to crack on with that story next week. It's not getting the coverage it deserves. I was hoping someone else might do the heavy lifting, but it's going to come down to us again, Theo. All right? Get your boots on. Just to be clear, Richard Ashworth, I keep wanting to call him Richard Ashcroft, but he's the link singer of the verb. It's not a very helpful mistake to make. Richard Ashworth lost the Conservative Party whip for refusing to vote for a motion that said sufficient progress had been made. Yeah. And Theresa May is now seeking to postpone the transition period precisely because sufficient progress has not been made.
That's the one, James.
Well done, everybody. It's 1 minute after 12.